All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're diving into the absolute invisible magic that actually connects our entire digital world. It's the hidden architecture running behind the scenes of, well, basically everything.
Hey everyone, let's talk about what an API actually is. Have you ever actually stopped to think about how an app like Uber works? I mean, how does it know literally exactly where you are, pinpoints it on a live map, and calculate your fare in, what, under a second? It's crazy. Your phone and their servers are just perfectly in sync. Well, the answer to how this happens comes down to three letters: API. APIs are essentially the invisible glue holding together basically every app you've ever used.
Now, API stands for Application Programming Interface. And yeah, I know that sounds like someone just threw three really fancy tech words into a blender, but let's demystify that acronym a bit. Because modern apps, like Spotify, Netflix, WhatsApp, or your bank, they aren't just one giant clunky blob of code. They're dozens, sometimes literally hundreds of separate software systems that all need to talk to each other. And they need a standardized way to do that. That's exactly what an API provides.
Okay, let's dive into this a bit more. At its very core, you can think of an API as a contract. It establishes these strict, non-negotiable rules of communication between two pieces of software. This contract defines exactly what can be requested, the specific format that request has to be in, and exactly what the expected response is going to look like. It basically lays down the law on what's allowed and what's definitely not.
So, moving on to the restaurant analogy. To make this whole technical architecture instantly relatable, let's use a classic metaphor that just makes the concept of APIs click perfectly. Picture your absolute favorite restaurant. Imagine you're the customer sitting down at your table. In the software world, you represent the client, so that could be your mobile app or your web browser. Now, obviously, you don't just march right into the kitchen and start cooking your own meal, right? That will be chaos. In this scenario, the kitchen is the server where all the data is stored and processed. And let's be real, you probably don't want to dig through the raw ingredients back there anyway. Just like a customer, a client app doesn't directly access a server's raw data. Instead of going to the kitchen, you use the menu and the waiter. The menu is kind of like the API documentation. It spells out exactly what you're actually allowed to order. And the waiter? Well, the waiter is the API itself. The waiter acts as your messenger. They take your specific request back to the kitchen, wait for the chefs to do their thing, and then they bring that finished food, or in our case, the data, right back to your table. You never even have to see the kitchen, and you definitely don't need to know how the food was actually made. And this brilliantly illustrates the four technical pillars of every single API call. Literally billions of them are happening right this second, and they all boil down to this simple loop. First, you have the client, the software making the request. Second is the request itself, the message saying what you want. Third is the server, the system receiving that request and processing it. And fourth is the response, the data the server sends right back to the client. Boom, that's the whole shebang.
Now, it's absolutely crucial we highlight a big distinction here. You've been using UIs, user interfaces, your entire life. You know, buttons, drop-down menus, forms. UIs are designed specifically for us, for humans to interact with. But APIs, they are built entirely for software-to-software communication. There are zero buttons, zero forms. It is strictly structured data flying across a network. Software talking to software.
Let's actually ground this in your everyday life, because I guarantee you've interacted with dozens of invisible APIs today without even realizing it. You know that weather widget on your phone's home screen? It's quietly calling a weather API every few minutes to grab the latest forecast. Or how about when you log into Spotify using your Google account? That's the Google OAuth API handling your authentication behind the scenes. And that tap to pay for your morning coffee? That single tap triggered a Visa or MasterCard API to securely authorize your transaction in literally under 300 milliseconds. It's everywhere. Let's just quickly walk through a real, practical example. Imagine typing a specific URL into your browser, something like api.agify.io/name equals Michael. By doing that, you, as the client, are sending a highly customized request. The API grabs that name, Michael, and instantly fires a response back to you. It comes back in this structured data format called JSON, and it actually predicts the age of someone named Michael based on statistics. So you get this incredibly personalized data back, and you didn't need to know a single line of how they computed it on their end. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just the sheer magnitude of this number. Look at that, $640 billion. That is the absolutely massive annual transaction volume that the payment company Stripe processes every single year. And here is the kicker. Every single one of those transactions happens purely through API calls.
It's wild. We are fully living in what economists call the API economy. And honestly, this is exactly why understanding APIs is a billion-dollar career skill. Take Twilio. They built a multi-billion-dollar business just by turning super complex phone call and SMS routing into simple API requests. Or look at Amazon's cloud business, AWS. It actually started out as just Amazon's internal APIs for managing their own servers. They realized, hey, other companies need this too. And today, AWS pulls in something like $90 billion a year as a massive public platform. Talk about a game changer. So, the crucial point here before we wrap up is clearing up some common beginner misconceptions. A lot of folks kind of confuse an API with a regular website, but remember, a website serves HTML for humans to look at, while an API serves structured data for software to consume. Another huge mistake is thinking APIs only exist on the web. The reality? APIs can be totally local, like when you call a Python function from a library right on your laptop, that's an API. Ultimately, an API is just any well-defined interface that lets one piece of software talk to another. And that brings us to the end of our foundational look at APIs. They truly, literally are the invisible glue holding our entire modern digital lives together, just constantly requesting, serving, and responding in the background 24/7. So I want to leave you with this one thought to chew on. Just how many invisible API calls do you think your phone made just in the few minutes you were watching this explainer?